It's time for a little bit of intellectual anarchy, where we engage in extreme truth, extreme common sense, and diversity of ideas. How's everyone doing today? Today, I want to talk about, or I would like to make the case for, woke ideology being a cult. Now, there's a lot of people saying that it's called a mind virus. But we already have a word for it in our society. It's called a cult. And I'm going to expose the cult-like behavior of woke ideology. So, let's get into it. Now, first thing I want to talk about is the idea of consensus science. Before I do that, let's talk about real science. Real science is observing something, see if you can repeat it through testing, and if you can repeat it enough and observe it enough, you can start create a law around it, and that's how science works. It's a discovering of truth. I personally believe it's a discovery of how God makes the natural world work. But it has to be observed and it has to be repeated to prove that it's true. Short definition, but that's traditionally what science has been. Now, what we have today is called consensus science. The science that if enough people believe it, then I should too. Irregardless of whether it works, whether it's true, whether it produces the intended results, that is not the criteria. The criteria is emotion-based. Does it make me feel good? As opposed to, which I will make the argument for, does good. But right now our society and a lot of woke culture is based on consensus science. And because academia is starting these consensus science, people who traditionally believed in truth, but truth is no longer a value in higher education. It's emotions. So, like Nazi Germany, they convinced their society that Jews were a lesser species, that gypsies were a lesser species of human, and the mentally ill. And they were able to get a certain segment of their society to exterminate them. Not based on any truth, not based on any facts, but it got them enough fear and anger that they were willing to believe it. And they believed it because consensusly everybody said that Jews were terrible and they are less a species. So if everybody's saying it, I will say it. It's called collective thinking, right? Collective thinking is about the collective. It has nothing to do with your individual thoughts. Your individual criticisms, your individualism doesn't matter. You believe what the collective believes. Like eugenics, early 20th century, 1920s, between 1900s and 1920, even before that. Eugenics believed that white people were better than everybody else. Almost the same thing that the Nazis did. It's an extension of that. And believes that black people were a totally different human species. and that they should be wiped out. Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, is a eugenicist and believes that black people should be killed in the womb because they would be no good for our society, and ultimately she believed that white people were better. It's amazing how so many Democrats who believe with black people hold her as a hero. I mean, Darwin was you know what the original title, look it up. The original title of The Origin of Species, by means of natural selection, by preserving of the favorable races in the struggle of life. The preserving of favorable races. They weren't talking about Mexicans and black people and Indians and Asians. They weren't talking about them. They were talking about white. Charles Darwin was white, and that's the original. They had to change it because it was racist. But a lot of people believed it. He couldn't prove that. Before we speak so highly of him, couldn't prove that. So they got rid of it. But a lot of people believed it. A lot of people believe it today. That's what consensus science does as opposed to actual science, which leads to pseudoscience and pseudo studies, where emotions and spectrums like color try to replace truth. People say, why people hate critical race theory? Because critical race theories goes beyond that white people enslaved black people in this country, treated them terribly, and segregated them after they allowed them to have freedom. And they had very bad outcomes with the law. The laws were not in their favor because of the judges who were there. They were laws that protected and discriminated against black people. Then we started to make changes. But critical race theory says, no, things like truth and things like capitalism and things like English and things like math are all white and oppressive. So therefore, we need to find a new way of doing things. You ain't gonna find a new way of doing things other than language, reading and writing, and math. That goes too far. It takes you into pseudoscience. And it's based, and people are believing it because it's consensus. People are saying, oh, if they believe it, I should believe it. I know no conservative or libertarians that believes that black people had a fair shake in this society. They came over here, they had a struggle, they had to overcome other things. The only disagreement is that you can't depend on the same system to fix you. You're going to have to do it yourself. That's the only difference. The critical race theory is part of conservative and libertarian theories that you can't trust the government because racism is baked into the pie. We believe you can't trust government because it always empowers itself. But in the middle, where people in the consensus science believe that there are ways to help people through government. And we believe those ways are very limited. This person goes way too far. This people seem naive. We may go too far on this other end and let people fall through the holes. That might be a fair criticism. But all those are based on truth, except for critical race theory. No one denies that white people enslaved black people. Of course, there were free slaves who did what they saw and had slaves themselves once they were free from their slavery. And slavery has been around for thousands of years. It's not an original construct from America. And slavery still exists today. We seem to be in our heads. But today, point out a law, and I'll fight it with you, that discriminates against black people. But as far as I'm concerned, what law is there that keeps a black man from doing what a white man can do? We know that Asians don't have, and some Latinos don't have, those hang-ups. They didn't have the privilege of learning that they shouldn't be successful in this country. So we have this spectrum, which leads to eventually anti-science. You see, now, Judaism, Christianity make spectacular claims. But they don't say that something that's true in science, that it's wrong. There's nowhere the Bible contradicts those things. You can look. You can look. But you know a cult when they say or become anti-science. And we see that we have people believing that girls can be boys and boys can be girls. That is anti-science. You got people believe that they can be animals. This is anti-science. We're a totally different species. We change the definitions and say babies are not babies. That's lessening the value of life. But it is life by all standards. If I took one strand of the DNA of the baby and put it on Mars and have the rover go over it, you will see in the news that they found life on Mars. So by all definition, the baby inside you, as women, biological women, that's a life by all definitions. Now, if you want to lower the value of that human life, then say that. But you can't say it is not a life. It is by all definitions a life. So emotions are now the main tool to come up with scientific consensus. I feel it. Don't you feel it? We feel it. Science. What do you mean it's science? Prove that it's science. No. There's a consensus. That's not how science works. So they redefined science. So let's take it in religious terms. Bring it closer to what a cult is, right? People who don't believe in them. See, I can go into a Jewish synagogue. They'll respect me. They'll welcome me. Jews wouldn't let me be a Jew. Christians, they'll love you, respect you. They'll ask you to accept Jesus as your Savior. Anybody can be a Christian. Open door policy. And even with Muslims, you can go into there, respectful, and you can watch one of their service, but not anybody can become a Muslim. But they are, and will pull them aside. The all for you to believe. For you to believe, to call yourself that, you have to believe a certain set of tenets. And you either believe those tenets and you become that, or if you don't believe in those tenets, then you're not that. That's fine. Where a cult comes in, they believe you have to believe it. You must be forced to believe it. And if you're not, you should be ostracized, attacked, and even killed. We see this in the woke culture. See, conservatives and libertarians and liberals, traditional liberals, classic liberals, believe in free thought and free speech. In a cult, you're not allowed free thought, you're not allowed free speech, and you're not allowed to leave. You're a traitor if you leave. If you fall away in Judaism, you're like everybody else in Judaism. Very few are really religious. If you're a Christian, you have fallen away. You're just backsliding. And that's between you and God. Same thing with Muslims. It's between you and God. Same thing with Jews, me and God. But you know a cult when it's between you and the people. When the people are forcing you to believe and die if you don't. Now, granted, there are sects of Islam that require you to believe through the threat of death. And we think they're problematic. And the moderate Muslim thinks they're problematic. The idea that Muslims don't think that's problematic is pretty stupid. I don't know where they get that from. They don't want to die just like anybody else. They don't want to be forced to do anything like anybody else. But right now in our society, if you don't believe, if you don't believe in their pseudoscience, critical race theory, that gender fluidity, and that truth is 100% relative, you are an apostate. You are dangerous. And it's all an attack on truth. It is all an attack on truth. So this is my case. Of course, conservatives can have cult-like behavior. Absolutely. Libertarians, absolutely. But very few of it is anti-science. Not as much as what they are today. Oh, who's calling me? Someone's calling me. What do you want from me? What do you want from me? So there's my case for why wokeism is a cult, not a religion. Very close to religion. Leftism is a religion, but wokeism is a cult. Leftism is based on communism but wokeism is a cult. This is what I believe. I think I made the case. Though we can see these in every other party, but man, the pillars of society are being broken down. These people, and what we're doing is, and I'll say it, this might be unpopular, is what we're doing. We're allowing crazy people to act crazy and affirming their craziness. we're letting them be crazy in our society. We know we do that for homeless people. And we're letting people who are clinically insane believe they're other people, other species, and other genders. And as we continue to let them go down this mental insanity, as we let them go deeper into their psychosis, their insanity will make them hurt themselves, and we see this. But I think we're going to come to a point where they no longer want to hurt themselves, they want to hurt everybody else. Because if you can't build a society on truth, then you can't build society. And you can't build society with people who don't believe in truth. That they believe that truth is relative, that your truth is your truth and my truth is my truth. No, there's very little things that truth is relative, but the majority of truths in life are absolute. And they think there is no absolute. It started off with, oh no, truth is absolute. Truth is relative. Do you like peanut butter? No. Well, I do. Well, see, what's true for you may not be true for me. And we let them continue with this sort of wordplay, and up until where there are anti-science saying, well, if I feel like a girl, I am actually biologically a girl. It changes me biologically. My mind is a girl. And we just know that's not true. There's been heavy foundations built upon these ideas. Let me ask you something. I don't know if I said this. I felt like I said this earlier. But how do you think those German doctors accepted this ideology that Jews are lesser and they should be exterminated? Well, they didn't. They just removed them and put in people who believed it already. So when someone comes up to you and says, well, the science says now that men can be women and women can be men. Well, that's a consensus pseudoscience propagated by somebody who got a degree and decided to kick out the foundation and say this is the new foundation without proving it to be true. So we got to protect the pillars of society, because these people take over. You can't build society on crazy people. I don't know if anybody told you that. There is a video of these triggered people being triggered by their allies, people, their own people, because they're not saying what they want to be said in the correct way, of the new way they feel something should be addressed, which changes with every emotion, blow of the wind. That's insanity. You can't build society on those people. And when society begins to crumble, then the roosters will come home to roost. Hey, I got a brand new course called the Identity Redesign Matrix. And one of the major modules and reasons I created this is to bring emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence, which our world is lacking today. It is beginning to come out. Go to the show notes. You go to James Salazar Media /SLING. You will see the prompt there. It's not open yet. Just days. Link to my QR code. It'll link you to everything I'm doing. Also, the James Salazar Media /SLING will link you to everything I am doing all my shows. My YouTube page has tons. This is one of them. I got the Future Republic, the James Salazar Media Podcast, the Brightburn YouTube Academy, and Intellectual Anarchy. There's a reason for every one. Catch them all. Like and subscribe. Appreciate it taking your time. If you disagree, put it in the show notes. Put it in the comments. If you agree, or if you see something I'm not seeing that even enhances what I say, or it does enhance and you want to expose me, whatever it is, press like, press subscribe, put it in the comments, and I will discuss it on the next show. Have a good one, everyone.